Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are our headlines from across the continent this evening. Now, it's another attempt by leaders in West Africa to resolve the political crisis in Mali. The presidents of Senegal, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Niger and Nigeria all met in Bamako today. This amid ongoing calls for the resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. More on that at the top of the show. In Nigeria, Islamic extremists have released a video showing the killing of 5 aid workers who were abducted last month. We'll get some analysis about that security situation in the northeast of Nigeria. And how is civil society coming to the aid of those caught up in the COVID-19 crisis in South Africa? We'll take a look at the work of the Kolisi Foundation tackling major food shortages in the country. Thanks for watching. Now we start in Mali, where there has as yet not been any official statement from 5 West African leaders who gathered there today. They were engaged in a fresh push to end an escalating political crisis. The one-day summit came after the failure of a previous mediation attempt last weekend. ECOWAS, that's the 15-nation bloc of West African states, is overseeing those mediation efforts. Now, the reason for the failure of negotiations up to now, the M5 opposition is insisting on the resignation of President Keita, who is refusing to go. News recently into us here, the opposition leader Imam Mahmoud Dicko has said, as far as he's concerned, today's talks have changed nothing. Jean-Emile Jamin has more about those talks.
Touching down on the tarmac in Bamako, then straight onto crisis talks. The latest round of dialogue got underway in Mali on Thursday with the hopes of 5 West African presidents, all riding on the well-being of the country's future.
Nous sommes venus en tant que chef d'État de la CEDEAO voir le président Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, voir également les parties concernées pour apporter vraiment la paix, le salut et faire en sorte que le Mali reprenne vraiment le travail pour la stabilité du pays, mais aussi de toute la sous-région.
A challenge lies ahead. ECOWAS had already suggested last week appointing a new constitutional court, as well as forming a government of national unity. But the proposals were swiftly rejected by the opposition.
Le Mali, depuis 2012, mais même avant, a connu ces recettes, a expérimenté ces unions, ces gouvernements d'union nationale qui ont implosé parce qu'il y avait plusieurs personnalités, plusieurs partis qui n'étaient pas tous d'accord sur le plan programmatique, sur le plan du projet politique.
This time, a coalition of politicians, religious figures and members of civil society, known as the June 5 movement, has united to hold power to account. Despite some concessions from President Keita, the M5, supported by a fringe group of the population riddled with unemployment and corruption, has continued to demand his resignation. Keita is facing accusations of failing to address a dire economic situation amidst Mali's 8-year jihadist conflict. It's a precarious situation, with the country's allies and neighbours fearful of a spillover effect, given it remains the epicenter of the security crisis in the Sahel.
And more news as we get it from that one-day summit in Bamako. Now to Nigeria next, where a gruesome video was released by Islamic extremists on Wednesday. It showed the slaying of 5 aid workers who were abducted in the northeast of the country last month. Those abductions coincided with a statement by a Boko Haram splinter group saying it would begin targeting Nigerians who work for international aid groups, as well as those who help the military. Now, earlier I spoke to Michael Ejiofor. He's a senior security specialist in Abuja. I started by asking him about the worsening security situation with 19 soldiers having been killed earlier this month on top of those aid worker deaths.
Well, the security situation is actually worsening and the government is concerned, which led to the president actually saying that the remnants of Boko Haram will be routed out. But this latest incident of the killing of the aid workers, it's very worrisome. It doesn't portray Nigeria in a good light. And I think the government should do everything possible to ensure that these people are brought to book.
The army, of course, is at the front line of this particular battle, but there is a lack of confidence in some quarters about the army's ability to handle it. The legislature has called for army chiefs to stand down. We can see for now that President Buhari is resisting that idea, but there was also 365 resignations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that situation within the army with those resignations?
Well, it's quite unfortunate. This is an asymmetric war, and we are not, Nigeria as a government, was not actually fully prepared for this war that we've been fighting for a long time. And with the economic downturn, there's no sufficient funds to get equipment apart from support from some foreign nations and international organizations. So that's what's making the world difficult. And it also impacts on the welfare of the soldiers who feel that they are not properly equipped and decided to throw in the towel instead of going to commit suicide.
So what do you think is the way out of this deadlock? Is it just a case of plugging away, trying to consolidate the armed forces and just keeping on that fight against those Boko Haram and splinter groups? Or do you have any other sort of ideas as to how it could be handled?
Well, it's not sufficient to continue with war. There are basic issues that government needs to address, like the issue of unemployment, the issue of welfare, security of the people. I think when all these things are taken care of, there will be less of the security challenges. So it borders on war of the mind rather than fighting the battle in the field. I think the government has to look inward to see how this will be provided.
That was Michael Ejiofor speaking to me a little bit earlier from Abuja. Now, some news in brief from across the continent. A French soldier has been killed in Mali. The young man was killed during combat operation against Islamic militants. An improvised explosive device was triggered next to his armoured vehicle, causing that fatality. This according to the Elysee Palace. In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni is set to run for yet another presidential term in elections coming up in January of next year. The 75-year-old is set to extend his rule to over 35 years after coming to power through an armed rebellion back in 1986. Ivory Coast's main opposition forces called for a delay in upcoming presidential elections to establish what they call a credible electoral commission. It said a postponement was supported by a ruling last week at the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Currently, the vast majority of Ivory Coast's local commissions are chaired by President Alassane Ouattara's RHDP party. In South Africa, there are concerns that the number of confirmed deaths due to COVID-19 have been under-evaluated. Statistics released on Wednesday show excess deaths of some 17,000 in the period May through to mid-July, this as compared to 2 years ago. Now, in a bid to stall the contagion, President Ramaphosa announced on Thursday that most public schools will shut for the next 4 weeks. Let's take a listen to Cyril Ramaphosa speaking earlier.
As a country, we've never before faced such a severe crisis or such an abrupt disruption to our lives. Under the most challenging conditions, our response as a nation has actually been quite remarkable. Even as we may have made some mistakes, we have shown an extraordinary capacity for innovation, for solidarity, and for collective action.
And with the state response to the outbreak already in overstretch, many organisations in South Africa have been taking direct action. The Kolisi Foundation is one such organisation set up by Springbok captain Siya Kolisi and his wife. It has been contributing to efforts to respond to rampant food shortages currently threatening 8 million people. Our correspondents have more.
The first black captain of the Springboks has organised food donations to those struggling to make ends meet. Siya Kolisi and his wife set up the Kolisi Foundation soon after the country's lockdown started. They have fed 80,000 people over the past 3 months.
And we've lived in the struggle. We've lived where I would have received these packages if I didn't make it in rugby. And I know what it feels like. And there's nothing horrible than going to bed without food in your stomach. But now we're telling people to stay at home. But how can they stay at home without food in their stomachs? And I've been driving around the country with the foundation, 16,000 kilometers, and my heart just breaks each and every single time.
Zelda, a former private secretary to Nelson Mandela, has supported the foundation from day one.
I saw that the day lockdown started, the first people to hand out food were the Kolisis. And I have, with admiration and so much gratitude, witnessed what they had done over the past couple of months.
With Siya now back to training, his wife Rachel, seen here bagging up 640 food packages, has continued the foundation's work.
It should last a month for a family of 6. And we've committed to every family for 3 months.
The foundation also supports initiatives from other organisations, like this soup kitchen, which serves 10,000 people a day. The couple's influence is far-reaching.
You know, a lot of NPOs really struggle to get assistance, and we just believe that as a foundation we've been able to assist with that, and so far I don't think there's anyone that we've actually said no to. So
Their contribution is welcome but only goes so far. South Africa remains the worst hit country on the continent, and the government remains under intense pressure to balance public health needs against soaring unemployment.
All right, hats off to the Kolisi Foundation. That brings us to the end of this edition of Eye on Africa. Thanks for watching.